guys, welcome back to Arsenal 23. My name's Seth. So today we're going to be testing 45 ACP versus 9mm. Now we've tested these two calibers in the past, but we got some pretty astronomical velocities out of our 45 ACP. So today we're going to be testing different ammunition and see if we get those same results. Now the guns we're going to be testing today is a Beretta 92FS with a 4.9 inch barrel and a Colt 1911 with a 5-inch barrel. A 1/10 of an inch difference in barrel length, I think we can live with that. Now we're going to be testing Federal Premium ammunition today with 124 grain Hydrashok for the 9mm and 230 grain Hydrashok for the 45 ACP. Now typically we do a history of the two calibers that we're testing, but today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to figure out the history of the 92FS and the Colt 1911.
So before we dive into the history of these two legendary firearms, this history section ended up being much longer than I originally intended. Compiling a total 191 years of weapons development and shoving it into a versus video probably wasn't the best idea I've ever had, but yet here we are. Feel free to skip ahead to the testing, it's timestamped in the chapters below. I just find the history of these iconic firearms extremely interesting and would like to share it with you guys. As for those that are still with me, let's dive into some history. The infamous 1911. This 45 caliber single-action semi-auto pistol began development in 1906 in the military sidearm trials, but the true story of the 1911 as we know it today begins nearly a decade earlier in 1896, when legendary firearms inventor John Moses Browning patented 4 different handgun mechanisms. One of these patents would go on to become the most popular handgun mechanism, the tilting barrel. Browning utilized this tilting barrel to develop the Colt automatic pistol, known as the Colt Model 1900 today, and submitted it to the United States military for testing. Although a revolutionary and promising design, it had a number of flaws that the US military didn't like. Browning addressed some of these military complaints in the Colt Model 1902 military, which included lengthening the grip and adding a slide release that would catch the slide when the magazine was empty, allowing for one-handed reloads. This model fared much better with the US military, but they maintained concerns about the relatively small cartridge it was chambered in. Both the Colt Model 1900 and 1902 pistols were chambered in the .38 automatic Colt pistol cartridge, which offered similar performance to 9mm Luger, but was a bit more akin to the size of a .38 Special. Due to the results of the Thompson-Lagarde ballistic test, the US military had its mind set that the next pistol to be adopted would be a .45 caliber. After beating out Luger and Savage in the 1906 pistol trials, the Colt Model 1905 was chosen to move forward in testing. In the years following these trials, Colt continued to tweak the design of their pistol to satisfy the military's complaints. In the Model 1907, a grip safety was added, then in the Model 1909, Colt changed the recoil mechanism into a single-link tilting barrel, where John Browning's patent from 1896 really became utilized. Following this, the Model 1910 addressed the rather vertical grip angle and added a thumb switch safety to the rear of the pistol. After addressing the remaining issues with the Colt Model 1910, the finalized Model 1911 was sent to the US military. The new and improved Model 1911 survived a 6,000 round endurance test and beat out Savage once again. On March 29, 1911, it was officially adopted by the US military and designated the Model of 1911, later changed to just M1911. As we know today, this was just in time for World War I. The M1911, after extensive field testing in World War I, was slightly modified to the M1911A1, which only included small external revisions. After these revisions, the M1911A1 was again adopted in 1926 and continued to serve as the United States military sidearm throughout World War II, the Korean War, and even conflicts as recent as the Vietnam War, but by this point the nearly 70-year-old design was showing its age. Under political pressure from Congress to standardize on a modern semi-auto pistol chambered in the NATO standard 9mm Parabellum cartridge, the United States military would eventually begin trials to replace the absolutely legendary M1911A1. This brings us to the history of the Beretta 92FS. Long before Beretta entered into the 1984 XM9 US pistol trials, back in 1914 they were attempting to design a new blowback pistol for the Italian military. When Italy entered into World War I, the need for military pistols increased dramatically. In 1915, Tullio Marangoni, while working for Beretta, completed his design of a simple blowback pistol and submitted it to the Italian army. It was quickly adopted and used throughout World War I, becoming designated the M1915. The M1915 was later revised in 1919, just after the war ended. These revisions included modifying the barrel mounting system, going from a round post to a T-slot mount. Because of this change, the slide was modified, resulting in the open-top slide that we all associate with modern Beretta pistols today. But this is just one of the 3 evolutionary pistols in the Beretta 92FS family tree. For the others, we'll have to fast forward to the end of World War II. Beretta was working to design a new pistol for the Italian armed forces to replace the M1934. Their new pistol was to be a locked breech design, a first for Beretta. This newly designed pistol was designated the Modelo 1951 and featured a falling locking block under the barrel. Although most likely influenced by the Walther P38, this mechanism allowed for the more powerful 9mm Parabellum cartridge to be fired from the newly adopted Italian M1951. Initially, the M1951 utilized an alloy frame, another feature carried into the 92FS, but antiquated alloying techniques in metallurgy caused the M1951's frame to crack and fail under the higher pressures produced by the 9mm Parabellum. This resulted in all further M1951s to be produced with a steel frame, being nearly 9 ounces heavier than its alloyed predecessor. Taking elements from both of these pistols, the M1915 and M1951, Beretta developed the Model 84, commonly referred to today as the Beretta Cheetah. Although not formally adopted by any military, the Model 84 featured 2 new advancements, one being a double-stack magazine. Both the M1915 and M1951 pistols used single-stack magazines, and as such had a magazine capacity of 10 rounds or less. In addition to this, the Model 84 also utilized a direct feed system, where rounds from the magazine feed directly into the chamber. These 3 pistols culminate in Beretta's most successful design, the 92 series. Developed by Carlo Beretta, Giuseppe Mazzetti, and Vittorio Valle, the 92 began production in 1976. Following a multitude of tweaks and improvements to the pistol, the finalized 92FS was entered into U.S. military's Joint Service Small Arms program in 1979. The 92FS was selected over entries from Colt, Smith & Wesson, Walther, and H&K, just to name a few, and officially replaced the M1911A1 as the standard U.S. military sidearm in 1985 as the M9 pistol. The M9 pistol would go on to serve as the U.S. military's standard sidearm for the next 32 years, when it was eventually replaced by SIG's M17 and M18 pistols.
So now that we know a little bit more about the guns we're going to be using today, let's go ahead and load them up, put some shots through the chronograph, see what kind of numbers we get. So we've got our chronograph set up at 7 yards. First up is the 45 ACP out of the 1911. .903. 952. And 906. Now let's test the 9mm out of the 92FS. 1081. Duplicate 1081. And 1104. So we got a duplicate reading on the chronograph. That's typically indicative of a chronograph failure. So we're going to put one more shot of 9mm through, just so that way we can get an accurate read. We got 1057. So we've crunched the numbers, and with our 45 ACP, we got an average velocity of 920 feet per second. Now that's 20 feet per second more than what was advertised on the box. With our 9mm, we got an average velocity of 1,080 feet per second. That's 160 feet per second more than the 45, but 40 feet per second less than what was advertised on the box. Now these velocities translate into 432 foot-pounds of energy for the 45 and 321 foot-pounds of energy for the 9mm. Now that's 111 foot-pounds difference. But is that enough to make a difference? Let's run these rounds through some other tests and see if we can figure that out. All right, so for our first test, we've set up some gallon water jugs. Now this isn't a really comprehensive test, but it should help us demonstrate the difference in energy between these 2 calibers. Hopefully it'll demonstrate 111 foot-pounds of energy difference. First up is going to be the 45 ACP. It emptied that second jug pretty good. Still just a tiny little bit of jacket in there. Completely split both sides and all the water ran out of it. On the second one, it's got a pretty good sized hole in the front and it did split the back. A little bit of jacket still in the bottom of this one as well. So the 45 did pretty well against those water jugs. Let's test out the 9mm. Completely launched that second one off the table. Yep, so it seems like that's where we went in. Got about a 9mm sized hole, but completely blasted out the back. This one was empty down on the ground about 3 feet away from the table. For this one here, see, it doesn't seem to have split the jug as much. I hit it a little bit higher up, so that might have had something to do with it, but a 9mm hole in the front, and then created about a 3-inch blast out the back. So you might have noticed while I was shooting the 1911, it took me a lot longer to get that second follow-up shot, whereas the 9mm, it was pretty rapid back to back. Now that's more about the guns and not necessarily the calibers, but I will say there is a significant jump in recoil from a 9mm to a 45 ACP. It's just something to keep in mind if you're thinking about buying either of these two cartridges. We saw these were pretty effective against the water jugs. Let's take it on to another test. So we've seen how effective these rounds are against water jugs. Let's see how they stack up in our penetration test. So we've got 10 pine wood boards followed by a water jug, and first up is going to be the 45 ACP. So we got a pretty centered hit. See, 1, 2, 3, 4. Started veering off on this fourth one, you can see on the side there. And then it busted out the entire backside of this one. Didn't touch the fifth one though, so I'm assuming it just veered out to the side. And just because I know everybody's going to want it done, now we're going to test the 230 grain full metal jacket out of the 45 ACP. Alright, so we went through 1, 2, 3, 4, exploded the fifth. Seems like we hit the 6th right here and continued on at the 7th. Now I'm not seeing this projectile in it. Oh, I got it right here. No, that's actually the hollow point. So this is typically why we don't really worry about full metal jacket rounds, because these hollow points just get packed with whatever material you shoot through, and they act just like a full metal jacket in this sort of test. So let's go ahead and move it on to 9mm. So the 45 really punched through those boards. Let's see how the 9mm stacks up. Nice centered hit. See, 1, 2, 3. There's the bullet right past the third one. Seems like it just punched the fourth one and stopped. So again, we found the round right here. Now on this one, oddly enough, it seems like the hollow point did open up a little bit. Let's run a full metal jacket through it, see if we get past 4. So now I've got a 115 grain full metal jacket in the 9mm. Let's see how this compares to the hollow point. Alright, so made it through the first one, second one, third one, made it through the fourth one, and made it through the fifth one. It doesn't really seem like it punched the sixth one at all though, so I'm assuming it had relatively low energy after the fifth one here. So, I don't know. The hollow point stopped on the fourth one, full metal jacket stopped on the sixth one. So, maybe there is a little bit of difference. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. So we've seen how these rounds compare in water jugs and in our penetration test. But those are just jugs of water and these are just boards on a table. Let's see how these rounds compare in ballistic gel. So we've got our ballistic gel block set up. Now you might notice, it is a very yellow block. I've looked at it, we've tested it. It is perfectly 10% ballistic gel. It just turned out yellow. I don't know if that's because of it oxidizing or what, but you can still see right through it. So this is the block we're going to roll with. All the other ones were cloudy. So first up is going to be the 9mm out of the 92 FS. See if I can get 2 hits kind of centered here. So I centered those shots a little bit more than I would have liked to. I'm going to see if I can shift just to the left a little bit with the 45. Yeah, I thought that one veered out the side of the block. Let's put one more 45 in there, see if it's consistent with this one. Alright, so we've got our 45 loaded up with another round. Let's see if I can keep this one in the gel. Yep, we kept that one in there, but just barely. It actually bulged out the side just a little bit. So yeah, our 45s are pretty consistent. Our 9mm are pretty consistent. Let's get a measurement on these and see how far they made it in. So with our 9mm, they centered at about 11.5 inches. One made it up just over 12, and then one came up just under 11. And with our 45s, seems like they averaged it right at 15. One coming in at around 14, and one coming in just under 16. Let's cut these rounds out and look at them. We'll start up here with the 9mm. Oh, it's really in there. So there's the 9mm, one on the top. And I might have to go in from the side to get this one. There we go. There's that second one. You can see we lost a bit of the pedal there. With our 45s, oh, the post is still sticking out from the Hydrashok. That is gnarly. And you can see how much that one really exploded the side of the block. Let's get that second one out. And again, these just expanded beautifully. So the wound channels on these things, they're pretty gnarly all the way around. The 45 definitely came out on top though. Wound channels at around the 2.5 inch mark, whereas it seems on the 9mm it's only about 1.5 inches on the widest one. The 45's just completely blasted out this side over here. You can really see the power that it demonstrated with that extra 111 foot-pounds of energy. So with our 45, we got better penetration, better expansion, a larger wound channel, and higher energy numbers. So why in the world would anybody want to go with the 9mm? Well, it all comes down to magazine capacity. With the 9mm, you can get 15, 16, sometimes 18, 20 rounds in the same size gun as you can with a 45 ACP. This goes across all gun brands, and it's virtually just the downfall of the 45 is magazine capacity. Now, me personally, I carry a revolver, so magazine capacity isn't that big of a deal. But to some people, having double the rounds means double the firepower. Now, we saw today, that's not always the case. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to stay tuned on future content. And if you like this video, be sure to share it with your friends so they know too. Thanks. So we've seen how effective these jugs are.